Russia is testing atomic bombs, Iran is pursuing an atomic bomb, and Israel is launching an attack against Iran's proxies and is no longer waiting in Lebanon. The Israeli Air Force is carrying out an intensive strike operation against Hezbollah in Lebanon, and at the same time, IDF forces are preparing to continue a military maneuver against the Hamas terrorist organization in the Gaza Strip. And right now, in the Middle East, the tension has been hanging in the air for a month with no progress because of the never-ending negotiations between Iran and the United States. So is the world moving quickly towards World War III? Today, we'll bring you Iran's new tactic for preparing for the approaching war. And we'll reveal all the information about the removal of Iranian missiles from under the ruins, and we'll reveal the assistance from Russia that is going directly to the Iranians. Now, did the Russians give the Revolutionary Guards a military capability to deal with the American Air Force? According to CENTCOM, the naval blockade on Iran is continuing fully. And according to the Vice President of the United States, the negotiations with Iran are moving in good direction. But on the other hand, the Revolutionary Guards are establishing a paid passage through the Strait of Hormuz and threatening that they are ready for a military campaign. In Iran, they are saying, either we win or we die. And meanwhile, the Russian bear, Vladimir Putin, arrived for a summit in China with President Xi Jinping, less than a week after Trump's visit there. Russia is threatening all of NATO with a broad exercise of its nuclear forces. How is this connected to the Middle East, you ask? We'll soon answer everything. I'm Mati Shoshani. Tonight, Yair Pinto is on a short vacation. We are boots on the ground, bringing you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel and also the whole truth about what's happening in our neighborhood, the Middle East. Today is May 20th. We need you in order to spread the truth. So share this video with as many people as possible. Back to the news now. The president of Russia arrived for a summit in China with President Xi Jinping, less than a week after Trump's visit there. And at the same time, he's threatening with a broad exercise of his nuclear forces. We'll soon break down all of this and how it connects to Iran. A heavy cloud of uncertainty continues to hover over the relationship between Tehran and Washington, as the entire region moves between fear of a renewed military confrontation and a fragile attempt to reach a diplomatic arrangement. This comes after the United States President Donald Trump announced that he had decided to delay a planned strike in Iran in order to allow more time for negotiations. It seems that both the United States and Iran are playing a double game right now. After the President of the United States canceled the attack he planned to begin yesterday, it seems that Tehran not only received it with open indifference, but is answering Trump with an unprecedented provocation. How, you ask? Iran established a new authority whose role is to collect passage fees in the Strait of Hormuz. And by doing so, Iran is changing the rules of global trade in an unprecedented way and emphasizing that it not only won the war, but is taking revenge on the entire world in a way that leaves everyone helpless. Trump's latest statements express deep frustration in the American administration over the difficulty of forming a clear strategy towards Iran. So far, neither the economic blockade nor the military campaign has produced a change in Tehran's positions in the negotiations, and the gap between the sides remains too large to bridge. American military officials believe that during the ceasefire, which lasted about a month, Iran used the time to adjust its tactics ahead of another possible confrontation with the United States. And right now, the crisis in the Persian Gulf is pushing Europe towards a step it did not want. After the European countries in NATO put the brakes on the President of the United States, Trump, in response, began reducing forces and defense systems throughout Europe. And NATO is considering a dramatic policy change regarding the confrontation with Iran. In addition, today it was revealed how Israel and America's Iranian regime change plan became complicated. Behind the scenes, it seems that Israel and the United States marked Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, yes, the old and most anti-Western president Iran ever had as his surprising candidate to lead Iran after the fall of the regime. An Israeli strike intended to free him from house arrest wounded him, and afterwards he already became a supporter of the Revolutionary Guards, and the plan to replace the leadership quickly collapsed. We'll bring you the full story in just a few minutes. In the shadow of the fragile ceasefire, Lebanese sources claim that there is no progress on the issue of Hezbollah's weapons. At the same time, a new poll shows large gaps between the communities in Lebanon regarding an agreement with Israel. The IDF spokesperson updated that over the past 24 hours, the Israeli Air Force struck more than 25 Hezbollah targets in several areas in southern Lebanon. Among the infrastructure that was struck, weapons depots, headquarters, and additional infrastructure, from which the organization's terrorists operated to advance terror plans against IDF forces in the state of Israel. Once again, England's connection to terror bodies operating inside it is exposed. The Revolutionary Guards, London branch, leaked documents examined by Iran International reveal that members of the Zarigalam family operated a financial network from Britain, China, and the Emirates, suspected of money laundering for the Revolutionary Guards. All the details in just a few minutes. So there's a lot ahead of us. Let's dive into the details. I'm Mati Shoshani. With me is Yair Pinto, and we are boots on the ground, bringing you the whole truth of what's happening in Israel and the war against the Revolutionary Guards in Iran, the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East. Now, 1 second before we begin, I want to call on you to keep spreading the truth. Share our content with as many people as possible. Click the subscribe button. And most importantly, don't forget to look for me, Mati Shoshani, and Yair Pinto on social media, so you can get a view through our eyes of what it is to live in Israel under war. Now look, I want to share with you what the feeling is in Israel. Here, there's a feeling in the air that at any moment, the war could continue. Let me tell you how things actually feel on the ground here in Israel. We're in this very bizarre situation right now, where life is normal, everything is going as usual. We're gearing up towards the holiday of Shavuot, of Pentecost, and at the same time, everyone is expecting, anticipating, fearing the fact that any moment now, and when I say any moment, I mean any moment within minutes or hours or days from where we're standing right now, we could go back to full war with Iran. And there's this sense of apprehension in the air, this sense of concern in the air. Just today, to give you an example, I was on a location scout with some friends and clients of ours for events that are supposed to happen later in the future. And when you ask yourself, what's going to happen in the next weeks? Everyone in this country answers the same thing. Ask President Trump. We don't know what's going to happen. We have projects that our team is supposed to film late in the month of May. Will we film them now or will we film them later? We don't know. Ask President Trump. We don't know where things are going. And the same applies to the northern border of Israel. I was up in Lebanon on Thursday, so just less than a week ago, spent the day embedded with the IDF across the border. But as I was traveling up north and stopped on the way in northern communities in Israel, including Kiryat Shmona, the most northern city proper in the northern part of the country, there's this sense in the air of everything is normal, and yet we could go back to war immediately. And it's a bizarre situation that we're in, because the government of Israel, obviously as a large organization, has to be ready. The IDF has to be ready. That means that, let's call it, the teams that are responsible for our warning systems, they're at a high alert. The Air Force teams that would be scrambled in case of an attack on Iran or from Iran, they're at high alert. Now the Iron Dome teams, the drone teams, everyone that would be scrambled in the time of a war, the special forces, everyone's on a high alert. And yet life is as normal. Life is going on as usual. People are dusting off the bomb shelters, making sure that everything is accessible, everything is ready, but still making plans for the weekend. People are still traveling on the weekend. People are still getting ready for a holiday weekend, which is tomorrow night here in Israel. So we're in this very tenuous, very bizarre situation where we're both apprehensive, both concerned, but also at complete peace. And I'll add one more thing here. The people of Israel, where in the past there was a sense of it's an emergency, we're at war, this has sort of become the new normal in the country. People are going on with life as usual. Schools are studying as usual. Every extracurricular activity you can imagine is happening as if there is nothing happening in the Strait of Hormuz, because we're beyond the point of feeling tense or concerned about it. There is nothing we can do aside from sit back and pray and wait for something to happen. And at the same time, there's no reason not to live our life in the way it's supposed to be lived. And that's really the reality that we're seeing right now on the ground with Israel. On a military level, on a government level, on a public statement level, absolute preparedness to anything that would happen from Lebanon, from Gaza, from Iran. On the everyday life, we're living life as usual here. That is testament to the absolute resilience of the people of Israel, to the spirit of the people of this country, to the fact that we have become accustomed to this looming threat. But at the back of our minds, and I say this both personally and collectively, there's this understanding that any moment things could dramatically change. When we hear President Trump say we were supposed to attack last night and didn't because of this reason or that reason, I mean, yes, there's the humor of the way these things are announced, but we take it seriously. For us, this is not an experimentation of philosophy. This is everyday life. This is reality for us. If a strike takes place on Iran, the retaliation will be landing right behind me on the slopes of Jerusalem or intercepted in the sky above me over this city. It is not something that we need to imagine. We've seen it happen time and time again. So how are things going on in Israel? We're both in an emergency state, ready to respond on a military level, on a national level, on a home front, a command level, ready for any eventuality. When it comes to everyday life, you see the resilience, you see the strength, you see the peace of the people of Israel. One last thought. I want to tell you something. If you study the Bible, and if you study how we're supposed to respond as a people and as a collective to situations of stress, we are told that God's supernatural peace is what indicates our spiritual life and our trust in Him. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It means that in the storm, in the pressure, in the looming threat of yet another round of conflict with Iran, we are supposed to feel supernatural peace. That's how I feel. That's how many others in this country feel. That should be your prayer back at home for the people of Israel. As we're about to enter into this holiday weekend, the holiday of Pentecost, Shavuot in Israel, well, the people in Israel were both apprehensive, but also at peace. Both ready to celebrate the holidays, but also ready to dust off the locks on our bomb shelters and get ready for whatever eventuality happens. For us, this is a clear war that must be fought. There's no point in trying to avoid it, no point in trying to ignore it. It is there in the background, and we know it's going to happen one way or another. And yet, the people of this country have looked danger in the eye, gone to war several times against it, and now we're living our life as best we can in light of that fear. I want to tell you something. That is something that our enemies hate about what happens here in Israel. The whole goal of the Iranian philosophy is to sow fear into the hearts of the people of Israel. I mean, that's where the word terrorism comes from sowing terror into people's hearts. Hezbollah, when it plans to attack northern communities, they want people to be scared. Iran, when it attacks ships, when it launches ballistic missiles, it wants people to be scared. And us enjoying our lives and living in peace and rejoicing and celebrating the life we have, that is a finger in the eye of the Ayatollah regime, of Hezbollah leadership, and of the Hamas party. And you at home should feel exactly the same way. By the way, for those of you who miss Yair and are concerned about his whereabouts, don't worry. He is on vacation and he will be back on Sunday. Let's talk about what you can do at home. Many Israelis are still juggling reserve duty while trying to get back to work and handle their day-to-day lives. It's not easy. Your body's tired, your mind's overloaded, and the pressure doesn't stop when the uniform comes off. I know it firsthand. I've been there, coming home from reserves, trying to be present for the family, catching up at work, while still feeling like I'm in survival mode. It takes strength, it takes energy, and faith to push through. That's why I started using Vinia. It's an Israeli supplement made from red grape cells that helps improve blood flow to your heart, to your brain, and to your muscles. And for me, that meant better focus, more energy, and fewer days of that foggy, burnt out feeling. I started using it during reserve duty, and I'm still taking it today. I like the coffee version in the morning. Some people go for the tea or the capsules, but either way, it simply works. And if you want to give it a try, go to ViniaTBNisrael.com or call 800-638-1944. Faith helped me stay grounded, and Vinya helped me stay sharp. Let's get back to the news. Look, to understand this moment in the Middle East, we need to begin not with the speeches, but with the water. In the Strait of Hormuz, according to an updated American intelligence assessment, around 10 mines have been identified, after a previous assessment spoke of a higher number. It is still not known what type of mines these are, but the very fact that some of them could drift with the current, and that even Tehran does not necessarily know exactly where all of them are, turns the opening of the strait from a regular naval operation into a very dangerous game of intelligence, engineering, rescue, air defense, and diplomatic restraint. The question now is simple. Does Iran really want a deal? Or is it using the mines, the strait, and time to hold the entire world by the throat? Because the moment Trump says Iran has 2 or 3 days to return seriously to the table, maybe until Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, this is no longer just another sentence in a media campaign. It is a time frame. And when Trump adds that he was 1 hour away from a renewed strike on Iran, that also needs to be taken seriously. He's trying to send 2 messages at the same time. On the one hand, he's still giving diplomacy another short window. On the other hand, he's telling Tehran, don't mistake this pause. This is not a cancellation. This is a delay. Vice President J.D. Vance gave it a colder, almost military wording. He said the administration believes progress has been made, that the Iranians do want to reach the agreement, but he also mentioned the second option, renewing the military campaign. Vance explained the American logic sharply. Iran can't be the first domino that opens a global nuclear arm race. Meaning, in Washington's eyes, this is not only a dispute over Tehran, not only over Israel, and not only over the Middle East. It is a test for every country that looks at Iran and asks itself, if they are allowed to reach the nuclear threshold, well, why not us? And this is where the real problem in the negotiation lies. Iran is not coming to the talks as someone admitting defeat. It's coming as someone who believes it survived. From the perspective of the Revolutionary Guards, the very fact that the regime is still standing after weeks of strikes, after the elimination of senior figures, after a naval blockade, and after damage to military systems is an achievement. That's why the Iranian demands remain very broad. Lifting sanctions, releasing frozen funds, lifting the naval blockade, opening the Strait of Hormuz, ending the fighting on all fronts, including Lebanon, and preserving uranium enrichment capability inside Iran. The Iranians may be willing to talk about the stockpile of uranium enriched to 60%, but according to the messages from Tehran, they're not willing to give up the principle. From their perspective, the right to enrich is a red line. From the perspective of Israel and the United States, that's exactly the heart of the problem. Because if the material remains in Iran, if the infrastructure remains in Iran, and if the Revolutionary Guards retain the ability to rebuild what was damaged, then the agreement may lower the flames in the short term, but it doesn't solve the threat. At the same time, there's another clock running, not a diplomatic clock, but an operational one. American officials assess that Iran used the ceasefire to dig again through ballistic sites that were buried in strikes, moving mobile launchers and reinforce underground facilities carved into granite mountains. This is a very important detail, because if the American strikes collapsed the entrances to the sites, but did not destroy the entire system inside them, then the Iranians don't need to build everything from scratch. All they need to do is clear the debris, open access, and return part of the system to operational status. On the ground, this may look like a technical detail, broken asphalt, a collapsed entrance, a blocked tunnel, but militarily speaking, this is the difference between a site that was destroyed and a site that was temporarily silenced. And if the site was only temporarily silenced, then every day of ceasefire is a workday for the engineers of the Revolutionary Guards. They clear, they connect, they move, hide, and try to make the next American strike more complicated. This is where the suspicion of Russian assistance also enters the picture. According to American officials, Iranian commanders studied the flight patterns of American fighter jets and bombers, possibly also with the help of Russian knowledge. The downing of an F-15E and damage to an F-35 were presented as a sign that some of the air tactics had become too predictable. That's true. This is a significant warning because the American Air Force still holds enormous power. But Iran is learning during the war. It doesn't have to defeat the American Air Force. It needs to make it pay a price, delay it, and create doubt among decision makers in Washington. That's why Israel is now looking less at the headlines and more at the capability Iran still has left. How many launchers are still active? How many ballistic missiles were pulled out of the ruins? How many production facilities can still operate? How many air defense systems were restored? How many mines are really in Hormuz? And how quickly Iran can launch a heavy barrage if it feels the next strike threatens the very survival of the regime. The assessment is that if the war resumes, Iran will not necessarily try to recreate the previous round. Last time, it managed its stockpiles carefully, as if preparing for a long war. This time, it may choose a shorter, denser, and more violent war. Less saving of ammunition, more barrages in a single day. More attempts to strike at the start of the campaign, before the other side manages to stabilize the rhythm. This doesn't mean Iran is stronger than the United States. It means Iran understands that the only way it can influence Trump is to try to make every American action very costly from the very first minutes. That price is not only meant for Israel, it's also meant for the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, ports, energy facilities, refineries, oil fields, export systems. All of these are inside the Iranian threat map. And above the table, some Gulf states are asking Trump to delay a strike and give negotiations a chance. Beneath the surface, they understand that an Iran that has not been defeated will return to extorting them. That is their dilemma. They fear the war, but they also fear Iran emerging from the war with a feeling of victory. Here, something important needs to be said. The Gulf states don't lack military capability. They have aircraft, American systems, the cash, bases, and intelligence. But for years, they preferred that the Americans, and sometimes the Israelis, carry most of the operational risk against Iran. Now the United States would like to see a broader coalition, not only for defense against missiles and drones, but also for participating in pressure on Tehran. But that is much easier to say than to do, because the moment a Gulf state openly participates in a strike against Iran, it becomes a legitimate target in the eyes of the Revolutionary Guards. That's why the strait is so important. Hormuz is not only a maritime passage, it is a pressure point that connects military power, energy, insurance, trade, and global politics. Now, with mines in the water, with Iranian claims of control over the passage, and with reports of an attempt to collect transit fees, Tehran is trying to turn the strait into a diplomatic card, not only to close it, to manage it, not only to threaten ships, to make clear that every ship passing through the area depends on Iran's patience. But this is also dangerous for Iran, because once the strait becomes an arena where mines drift, tankers are inspected, and American ships operate under threat, any mistake can ignite the campaign. One mine hitting the wrong vessel, one drone getting too close, one Revolutionary Guards boat provoking an American ship in the Middle East. Sometimes wars do not begin with a major decision. They begin with a small decision that someone on the ground made 3 seconds too late. And before we continue, this is your moment to help us spread the truth. If this report helps you understand what is really happening in the Middle East, give it a like, share this video with friends and family, and don't forget to click the subscribe button of TBN Israel. Every share brings one more person to understand the reality behind the headlines and to stand with Israel in real time. The Iranian arena is not playing out only in Tehran. It is also playing out in Beijing. Russian President Vladimir Putin met with Chinese President Xi Jinping and spoke about a partnership that has entered a new stage of faster development. Xi spoke about healthy and stable long-term relations. These are diplomatic sentences, but behind them lies a broader picture. Russia and China are coordinating positions while the United States is trying to pressure Iran, while energy prices are sensitive, and while the most important strait for the Gulf economy is under threat. For China, this is not only a matter of ideology, it is energy. If Hormuz is dangerous, if the sea lanes in the Gulf are unstable, and if a war with Iran raises the price of oil and gas, Russia becomes an even more important supplier for Beijing. That's why the conversation between Putin and Xi is directly connected to what is happening in the Middle East. When China sees instability in the Gulf, it strengthens Moscow. When Moscow sees American pressure on Iran, it gains a seat at the table of influence. And when Iran sees Russia and China moving closer together, it gets the feeling that it has a larger backing against Washington. At exactly this time, Russia opened a broad drill of its nuclear forces. According to reports, this is a 3-day drill with tens of thousands of soldiers, hundreds of missile launchers, aircraft, warships, and submarines, including submarines carrying ballistic missiles with nuclear warheads. We need to be careful here. This doesn't mean Russia is about to use nuclear weapons, but it certainly means that Moscow wants to remind the world that it is a nuclear superpower and that it can raise the threat level while the West is already overloaded with Iran, Ukraine, and tensions inside NATO. Now, the connection to Iran is clear. If Russia is really helping, even at the level of intelligence or flight pattern analysis, it doesn't need to send soldiers to Tehran. It's enough for it to help the Iranians understand how the Americans fly, where they repeat themselves, and what can be done to make things harder for them. At the same time, Russia is signaling to Europe, do not think you're protecting just because you are in NATO. The Russian threat against the Baltic states alongside the nuclear drill creates additional pressure on the West precisely when the United States wants to focus its attention on the Gulf states. And this is where Trump is in a complicated position. On one hand, he wants to end the war with Iran very quickly, as he said. On the other hand, he can't allow himself to deal or a deal that looks like an American surrender. He's already said Iran will not have a nuclear weapon. He's also said the price of high fuel is small compared to the danger of a nuclear Iran, meaning he's trying to prepare the American public for the fact that this struggle will cost money. But he also knows that the American public doesn't like long wars, especially when the price at gas stations continues to rise. And meanwhile, the unusual story surrounding Mahmoud Ahmadinejad has also been revealed. According to reports, Israel and the United States marked him at the beginning of the war as a surprising candidate to lead Iran after the fall of the regime. This is a choice that sounds almost impossible because Ahmadinejad was one of the most extreme voices against Israel and the United States for years. He supported the nuclear program and was identified for years with a hard ideological line of the Islamic Republic. But in recent years, he clashed with the regime leadership, was disqualified from running for president, and his movements were even restricted. The strike near his home in Tehran, which according to reports was intended to hit the Revolutionary Guard's personnel, who effectively held him under supervision, wounded him and disrupted the move. After that, according to the reports, he lost confidence in the plan. What matters here is not only the name Ahmadinejad. What matters is the understanding. Regime change in Iran is not a button you press. Even if you hit the leadership, even if you eliminate senior officials, even if you disrupt the systems, the Iranian regime is built from layers of the Revolutionary Guards, security mechanisms, economic interest, ideological loyalty, fear, and corruption. It is very hard to dismantle such a structure from the outside without an internal force willing to take responsibility for it from within. At the White House, they're trying to present the goals of the war differently, destroying Iran's ballistic array, dismantling their production facilities, sinking the Iranian Navy, and weakening Tehran's proxies. This is a clearer military framework than a framework of regime change. But on the ground, the things connect. If you destroy the missiles, if you damage the Navy, if you choke the oil, if you weaken Hezbollah and Hamas, and if you shake Tehran's leadership, you are not only damaging the military capability, you're damaging the regime's sense of control. That is exactly why Lebanon is now in a sensitive place. In the north, the Air Force struck more than 25 Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon. Weapons depots, command centers, and infrastructure used to advance terror plans against IDF forces in the state of Israel. This isn't a side event. If the campaign against Iran resumes, Hezbollah will need to decide whether it enters the campaign more strongly or remains limited. From Israel's perspective, Hezbollah cannot be allowed to rebuild its layer of threat in southern Lebanon while all attention is directed towards the east. And in Lebanon itself, they understand the trap. There is talk of an arrangement, of a real ceasefire, and of course, on top of that, of an American pressure to create a diplomatic track. But without dealing with Hezbollah's weapons, any agreement will surely be limited. Israel will not be able to see command centers, the depots, or observation positions, and firing capabilities returning to the villages across from the border. That is exactly why Lebanon is now in a sensitive place. In the north, the Air Force struck more than 25 Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon. Weapons depots, command centers, and infrastructure used to advance terror plans against IDF forces and the state of Israel. This is not a side event. If the campaign against Iran resumes, Hezbollah will need to decide whether it enters the campaign more strongly or remains limited. From Israel's perspective, Hezbollah cannot be allowed to rebuild its layer of threat in southern Lebanon while all attention is directed east. In Lebanon itself, they understand the trap. There is talk of an arrangement, of a real ceasefire, and of American pressure to create a diplomatic track. But without dealing with Hezbollah's weapons, any agreement will be limited. Israel will not be able to see command centers, depots, observation posts, and firing capabilities returning to the villages across from the border. And say the threat has gone down. On the other hand, the Lebanese state is too weak to force Hezbollah into real disarmament. That is why every solution in Lebanon ultimately depends on what happens in Tehran. Gaza also enters the picture. The Trump administration announced new sanctions against networks and figures supporting Hamas. The sanctions target organizations of pro-Palestinian flotillas to Gaza, networks identified with the Muslim Brotherhood, and coordinators connected to Samidun and the Popular Front. This is an important move because it makes clear that Hamas does not live only from the tunnels in Gaza. It also lives from international networks, from activists, from organizations, money campaigns, and flotillas that try to present terror as civilian activity. At the very same time, Hamas continues to threaten around the issue of prisoners and the death penalty law for terrorists. The organization speaks about abducting soldiers as a way to release prisoners. This isn't new, but it is dangerous. When Hamas is under military, political, and economic pressure, it tries to regain initiative through a symbolic threat. For Hamas, an abduction is not only a military action, it is a way to break the rhythm, to bring itself back to the center of the stage, and to make Israel pay a heavy public and emotional price. That's why the overall picture is clearer now. Iran is trying to buy time without giving up a capability. The United States is trying to keep a credible military threat without being dragged into a long war. Israel is preparing for the possibility that it may be required to act in Iran, Lebanon, and Gaza almost at the same time. Russia and China are moving closer together and understand that every crisis in the Gulf gives them leverage against the West. The Gulf states are trying to prevent fire on their energy facilities, but know that a stronger Iran after the war will extort them even more. And Hamas and Hezbollah are waiting to see whether Tehran gives them an order, money, or oxygen. The biggest problem in the Middle East is that not every side is looking for the same ending. Trump wants an agreement that prevents a nuclear weapon and allows him to say he won. Iran wants to survive, to preserve enrichment, and exit the blockade without appearing to have surrendered. Israel wants to remove a real threat, not only replace a headline. Russia wants to show that the West is exhausted. China wants stable energy without paying a diplomatic price. And all of Iran's proxies want to prove they are still part of the game. That is why the coming days are so important. If Iran submits a real proposal that deals with the nuclear issue, the missiles and Hormuz, the diplomatic track may receive more time. If it continues to buy time, to rebuild missile sites, to hold mines in the strait, and to demand relief before concessions, Trump may decide that the talks are not taking place in rooms, but only through force. And once that happens, the campaign will not remain only in Iran. Israel will need to prepare for missiles. The North will need to prepare for Hezbollah. The Gulf will need to prepare for energy facilities under threat. The American Navy will need to prepare for mines, drones, and fast boats. And the world will need to understand that the struggle over Iran's nuclear program has become a struggle over the entire power structure of the Middle East. The clock has not stopped now. It has only shifted to a quieter pace. And if Tehran makes the mistake of thinking that quiet is weakness, the next question will not be whether the war returns, but who opens it first and in which arena. So guys, keep spreading the truth. Follow us. Most importantly, don't forget to click the subscribe button so that you stay tuned to the truth in real time and never miss boots on the ground. Keep looking for us, Mati Shoshani and Yael Pinto, on social media to see life in Israel through our eyes. Now let's end as always with prayer for Israel. Guys, if you're not regularly praying for the people of Israel, just know this. This is a biblical commandment. We're commanded to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, for the people of Jerusalem, and of course for God's plan to unfold around the world. And if you're confused about how to pray, because social media is confusing you, because the news is confusing, you just ask for God's will to be done on earth as it is in heaven. We're called to pray for our leaders. We are called to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. We're called to pray and stand with our men and women in arms. So make sure you pray for the Israeli soldiers, both men and women fighting on all fronts, in Lebanon, in Syria, in the Gaza Strip, and in Judea and Samaria. Make sure you pray for the American soldiers fighting throughout the Middle East, Trump, Prime Minister Netanyahu, and of course, always pray for the peace of God's eternal city, Jerusalem. The city right behind me, that is the testing ground of God's faithfulness to his people Israel and to the entire world. Be blessed, guys, and I'll see you all the next time.